Hello and welcome everyone to this webcast on Rethinking IT for SME, from business enabler to agility engine. My name is Timo Elliott and I'm an innovation evangelist for SAP. SAP and Oxford Economics recently surveyed 2,000 executives, including the technology function, to understand how small and medium-sized organizations are positioning themselves for the new opportunities of the new economy. The report concludes that the IT function has become the heart of modern business, supporting the rest of the organization's long-term success. IT plays a critical role in preparing the rest of the organization for long-term resilience, setting the foundation for ongoing digital transformation, and ensuring that every other part of the business has the tools they need to succeed. To help me discuss the challenges and opportunities, I'd like to welcome the authors of the Oxford Economics report. Ed, Adriana, please could you introduce yourselves and give us a high-level overview of your research?
Thank you, Timo. Great to be with you once again. I am Ed Cohn, Editorial Director and Technology Practice Lead for Oxford Economics Thought Leadership.
And my name is Adriana Gregory. I'm a senior editor on the thought leadership team at Oxford Economics. It's great to be here talking about our recent research with SAP. Ed and I have both worked closely with SAP on the study for most of 2020, and it's been really interesting to get a picture into how executives across functions, including IT, are adjusting their management tactics around digital-driven strategies, adopting different softwares, and focused on surviving the crisis and also positioning for future growth.
Yeah, absolutely. We have all this year experienced how connected we are, how interconnected we are. We've all felt the same terrible pandemic and reacted to it. And actually, that idea of every part of a business and its ecosystem being interconnected is one of the real frames that we've been looking through. We sometimes call it systems thinking, and that puts a lot of pressure on IT to deliver the kind of data flows, the uniform processes to enable this way of working in what is a sometimes painfully connected world. But there's so much opportunity there for businesses to survive and thrive around the work that IT makes possible.
So there are lots of challenges and opportunities for the IT function. Ed, what are some of the key differences between larger and smaller organizations when it comes to IT's role?
It's a great question, Timo. Obviously, every company is different, but by and large, what we see is the IT function, the role of the CIO or the senior tech person at a smaller company is just so all-encompassing. While you're the CIO of a big organization, you've got people who handle support. You've got people who handle different aspects. Probably at a smaller organization, you're going to have your hand in everything. It's a lot of pressure, but it's a lot of opportunity, again, around this idea that we want every part of the business to be connected and every part of the ecosystem to be connected. If you actually are aware of the details, there's a huge role at small and mid-sized companies for the CIO to be a true strategic leader in a way that perhaps wasn't always the case historically in this market segment.
So IT is more strategic than ever for small and medium-sized organizations. Adriana, how have the challenges and opportunities changed over time?
Well, I think that some of the challenges and opportunities that Ed has mentioned have only gotten more pronounced during the COVID-19 pandemic. As he said, we've all gone through this together over the past year. We know that companies of all sizes are facing similar challenges around disruption of their business models, major workforce issues, and frankly, just personal stress that individual workers and executives are dealing with. But at the same time, we know that the economic constraints, the resource constraints on mid-market firms is often much greater than what's happening with larger firms. So I think that kind of the role of the IT executive as wearing many hats is probably just, that's probably just even more the case now than it was at the start of the year.
Yeah, it puts a responsibility on IT to build that infrastructure. We think about software like ERP. that's the beating heart of an interconnected organization, because all your relevant info, or most of it, is right there. And to be interconnected is to share data, to have common processes. So it expands the role of IT in a smaller organization beyond the sort of basic enabling technologies that we're familiar with, to really having a similar infrastructure at a reasonable scale that you might have found only in a much larger company several years ago.
So smaller organizations can now also benefit from more interconnected data and systems. What are the trends that you're seeing that are accelerating these kinds of transformations going forward? Adriana, let me start again with you.
I think we're seeing a lot more emphasis just on organizations wanting to be prepared for ongoing change. I think more of a need to understand future risks and have visibility into different parts of the organization, and even things that are happening outside their organization. So obviously that requires a lot of new processes and new tools for actually understanding what does lie ahead.
I think we have, obviously in the headlines and in our daily lives, we all see an increased emphasis on untangling that complex supply chain. And smaller companies have frequently very complex supply chains, global supply chains, and having the technology in place to manage those, to simplify them, to make sure the information is flowing, to make sure you have some alternatives when one source suddenly is unavailable. That is critical. And that's a huge challenge for IT. And another, it's a constant, is talent. You've got to compete with all manner of companies, large and small, for the right people who have the skills to use this technology, and not just the tech, but to understand it as a driver of business. Those are pretty advanced skills, and it's a challenge for many organizations, but it's one that the CIO or the person in charge of technology really has to focus on more than ever today.
So we've talked about the opportunities and touched on some of the challenges. Could you tell us more about what's top of mind for IT executives? What are their main goals and priorities, and how has that been changing during the crisis?
Sure. I think you can see from the responses from the IT executives that we surveyed that, they're focused on far more than technology infrastructure. Big picture strategic goals were clearly top of mind. They cited growth and improved customer experience as their goals, ahead of things like enabling digitization or increasing productivity. And again, I want to remind everyone that our survey was fielded in the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we thought it would be interesting to look at how those results changed over time. So to see the respondents who were from countries that were dealing with an early peak, how did they respond? And we saw that those strategic goals remained in focus even for those that were dealing with the crisis at the moment.
It's been a stressful year for all of us, and IT is no exception. So many strains on the business, so many new demands, and in the midst of this, they've still had to remain focused on things like cybersecurity and uptime and availability, and of course, making new technologies, or unfamiliar to many people technologies like the ones we're using today, just widely available overnight. And so a lot of pressure on the IT department, and maybe a shift in some priorities, which we certainly understand. When you're in a crisis, you have to deal with the crisis. But I think one of the big challenges for IT and for senior management in general is keeping an eye on growth, keeping an eye on what happens after the crisis and after the recovery, so that you're well positioned and you can service your customers and help your employees do their jobs, not just in this moment when we're all sort of bailing water, but in the better times that will come.
So what direction are organizations going from a technology perspective?
I think a lot of it is driven by external factors, like what customers and employees need from the organizations they're working with. We know that customer needs have changed a lot in the past year, even more so than before. They're looking